today also.
Ooh, hold on one second, guys. All right, good evening. Happy Thursday. It's a very lucky day. Some may say I am Mrs. Dave the lawyer, real name Jacqueline Leah. And last night we got through the entire stream about Muslim Brotherhood and how it affects America, led by Ted Cruz. That was a very lit chat. A lot of people had a lot of things to say yesterday about that stream. Not really gonna recap it, not much to recap. To be honest, I really didn't feel like we got anywhere in that stream, and the comments that people were making were not very helpful at all either. But we did have a chance to also begin the restreaming of the Senate hearing from Wednesday, August 5th, about the solvency of Social Security. And that, I feel like, is a very important topic. The Senate and Congress have had multiple hearings. I've streamed multiple hearings on this topic, and it's an issue. They don't know what they're going to do with Social Security. It's a hot topic. It affects many, many Americans. And to be honest with you guys, I'm not 100% sure where we left off. We're probably going to overlap a little bit, but it's a long hearing and it's important. So let's get started.
So includes.
Good job, Maddie, getting your steps in.
I was going to go to Senator Grassley, but I believe he stepped out. Yep. So then next on my list would be Senator Cassidy, unless Senator Cornyn, I believe you did not want to say anything. Senator Cassidy.
Let us be clear. We're talking today about setting up a process. We're not talking about a specific solution, a process that would be bipartisan, ideally involving the House to look at solutions. To have it mischaracterized and misrepresented as Republicans cutting things is false. It is lying to the American people. This committee hearing is about setting up a process to listen to proposals about hitting billionaires and millionaires with lots of money, or other proposals, however it is, to have something to present to us in this committee in normal order to either reject or accept. It isn't one proposal. It could be two, it could be three. And any member here could put up a bill in the nature, an amendment in the nature of a substitute and replace it all. That's what we're talking about here. If the other side of the aisle thinks that they've got a great idea, they should want this process. They should want this process because that would give them the opportunity to present to the American people and to this committee and to the Senate their particular perspective. To say that you don't even want a process, however you kind of put all kinds of fancy words about it and rhetoric about that side and this side. If you say you don't even want a process, it means you don't want to take it on. That you've decided it's more important to be a politician and to have an issue to divide our country than to be a senator who's looking for solutions. By the way, I have an idea. I'll be honest about that. Bipartisan, with multiple Democrats on the others, multiple Democrats supporting the idea. But that doesn't mean my idea will be the one that's accepted. We today are only talking about setting up a process where the American people have the opportunity to have input in order at the end of that process would bring to this committee a product to be considered or rejected and replaced with another product. That is regular order. And to start saying it's partisan and we're cutting benefits, that is not true. Why am I so passionate? Guess what? You know what's really going to cut seniors? If we don't fix it, and there's going to be by law a 22 to 28% cut in benefits for every senior currently receiving Social Security. Or will increase taxes by 40%. Boy, won't that gut the ability to save money for retirement for the American people. Or we'll just borrow lots of money and destroy our country's credit rating. And every year we wait, it gets worse. Now, I have been told by Bernie Sanders and by Lindsey Graham, Bill, I'm quoting Lindsey now, you're a lousy politician, but you're a good senator. I took that as a compliment. I challenge all of us to be lousy politicians, but to be good senators. Because right now, the longer we wait, the harder it is for our country, and the more that a senior is going to see their benefits go away, and the more the American people, more likely the American people will see their taxes go up, or our country will have to borrow so much money that we will go into oblivion. Let's be patriotic. Let's be good senators. Let's be here to make the hard decisions. No, not on a particular solution, because what we're considering today is only a process bill. It sets up not an independent commission which is isolated from the influence of the voters. It sets up something which ultimately comes to this committee. This committee, with everybody on this committee answerable to the voters, and everybody on this committee then having to take a vote on either that which is produced or an amendment in the nature of a substitute. That would again go to the floor of the Senate, where every senator who's answerable to the people of his state or her state would again have a chance to weigh in. This is the way the process is supposed to work. And what we're considering today is basically a time agreement. And time agreements are how things are done around here. I am so frustrated by this kind of, let's be political. Let's just one more time use this as a wedge issue. No, let's be good senators. Let's be good senators. Let's vote for a bill that sets up a process in which anybody's proposal can be considered, heard, and voted on and chosen. This is not about a solution. This is about a process to arrive at a solution. If you care about the United States and if you care about seniors, we should be voting for this bill today.
Thank you, Senator Cassidy. Senator Warner.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing. Good to see some folks like Mark on the panel. You know, this is something, I appreciate everybody's passion on this issue that you and I worked on, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
We started, I think, our first gang.
That's right.
Gang of 6. We didn't obviously get it done, or we wouldn't be here today still debating this issue. I do believe the only way we're going to get this solved, though, is through a bipartisan effort. We know Social Security is the most important commitment our country makes to seniors and to surviving spouses and children, people with disabilities. It supports 70 million Americans. It ensures another 239 million workers against the risk of aging, disability, and death of a spouse or a parent. We also know that in 6 years, and one of the things about this, where I agree with Senator Cassidy, some of this it's math. We're going to hit this cliff. In the fourth quarter of 2032, retirement trust fund is depleted, and every beneficiary takes an automatic cut of about 22%. That's what happens if we do nothing. For Virginians, it means nearly 1.5 million Virginians who receive some form of Social Security benefits will have a dramatic cut in those benefits. And when the trust fund runs dry, the average Virginia retiree stands to lose more than $500 a month. In my state, that's close to $9 billion taken out of the pockets of Virginia seniors. A typical couple retiring in 2033 would lose nearly $17,000 a year. You know, this is going to be a disaster. And the thing that's also coming on top of this is, as I know the chairman and ranking member knows, the Medicare Hospital Insurance Fund is about to go solvent a few months after that. That's another hit of 11%. So, and for those of us who have been talking about this, we go way, way back in time, in 2010, when we were starting some of these efforts, Social Security's 75-year shortfall was $5.4 trillion in 2010 dollars. Now it's $30 trillion. And I think we all know every year the math gets uglier. We can talk about processes. The one thing that we looked at, and I look forward to continuing I've laid out ideas, taken hits from both sides on some of the ideas I had. One thing I hope, as we are forced to grapple with this, that whatever situation around caps and age and benefits, that we also set in process something where we don't wait another 30 or 40 years before we take it up again. One of the things, Mr. Chairman, you and I worked on together was something that said, every 10 years you'd have an automatic reset to make it the trust fund solvent for 50 years going forward. So you don't allow us to get into the ditch we're at this point. I'm open to all ideas. Again, as somebody who's already taken the hits on laying out some controversial ideas, I think we're going to have to come back and address them again. But I do believe that having these kind of hearings to set up this stage so that we know it's coming. We can't pretend like it's we didn't see this coming very directly. And obviously, as I think those of us who've wrestled with versus Medicare, which is a real challenge, this one starts with just plain old math. And I think reasonable people working on this could maybe get it right. We might not even need to go to a AI-based solution. We might be able to actually, as senators, put our heads together and sort this out. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to make an opening statement. I look forward to the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Warner. And I, too, fondly remember our work together on the Gang of Six, and I hope we can do another similar endeavor that puts it over the goal line this time. Senator Johnson.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, my 30 years in manufacturing solved an awful lot of problems, and you realize there's a process to solving a problem. The first is to admit you have one, which I think we all admit we have the problem. The second step is even more crucial, so you have to properly define it. The last step is the solutions. And around here, what seems to happen all the time is everybody's got their piece of legislation, they've already got the solution, but they haven't properly defined the problem. So let me, I guess, throw out there, the problem we have to deal with is the fact we're $40 trillion in debt, heading to $60 trillion. We need to agree on common facts, okay? One of the facts that we have to grapple with is benefits already exceed revenue. But again, we're honoring those benefits, right? When the trust fund runs out, it shouldn't be a calamity. We're just going to have to plus up those benefits, and we'll probably do that. One fact we ought to recognize is that a U.S. government bond held in the hands of a government agency has no value. The trust fund's a fiction. Another thing we ought to grapple with is Social Security is a legal Ponzi scheme. I get criticized for saying, but that's exactly what it is. We extracted money from taxpayers, investors. We spent the money, it's gone. It got paid out to earlier investors, and there's nothing in value. We have to recognize that reality. I often hear from constituents who go, that's my money. Well, it is to a certain extent. But I want to enter in the record Table 1, money's worth ratios for hypothetical workers with various earnings levels. So basically what this says is a Social Security recipient receives what they receive for each dollar they put into the fund. And it ranges from a low of getting back 59 cents on the dollar to a high of getting $4.78 on the dollar. So again, this, that's my money. It's a fiction. It wasn't set up as an investment fund. You'll not solve this problem if you're not willing to recognize how grossly mismanaged Social Security was for decades by politicians, by our predecessors. They squandered the money. There's nothing of value there. And even worse than that, they have run up enormous deficits, $40 trillion in debt, so we may not have the financial wherewithal to continue to plus up benefits. Personally, I'm amazed that the debt bomb hasn't already gone off. But it hasn't, because I guess we're the least worst in terms of governments around the world. We're still a safe haven. But again, what I would suggest is let's agree on common facts. Before we leap to solutions, let's agree on that. I held a budget hearing yesterday. The title was Medicaid the Reality. And I know my Democrat colleagues must have got under the skin because in the end they said, yeah, you turned this into a debate society. Well, it's exactly what we're doing here. I thought this was the greatest deliberative body. But they didn't like the fact when they would lie and say that we want to cut and slash. I heard the exact same words from the ranking member today. We're going to cut and slash Social Security. No, we're not. That's a lie. We're not cutting and slashing Medicaid. The facts on Medicaid, which I kept having to repeat, 2014, the start of Medicaid expansion, we spent $300 billion. 2019, before the pandemic, $400 billion. Last year, $668 billion. This year, we'll probably spend $735 billion. I have not seen a projection where that number decreases. Where do you get cut and slash? It's a lie. Quit lying. Start telling the truth. Start acknowledge reality. So I'm all for a process, but please, God, please, let's have the process go in the right order. Let's start defining the problem with facts. Let's agree on the facts. Stop lying about people. Stop saying that we want to do, no, we want to preserve Social Security. And the best way to do that is reduce the deficits so we don't run into this massive debt bomb that's going to blow up on our face and we won't have the wherewithal to plus up the benefits when the fiction of the Social Security Trust Fund runs out. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm so glad that Senator Johnson said what we've all been thinking. We talked about this yesterday too. Social Security is literally a legal Ponzi scheme. And when I did research into it, literally I read that they don't consider it like a Ponzi scheme because the government tells us exactly what they're doing. But I just want to read to you guys what I was researching earlier, because I think it's important to understand the original purpose of Social Security and how it really was only utilized for a few years from the original purpose. But the original purpose was to protect workers from losing their income in old age. So workers and employees would contribute through payroll taxes, building eligibility for a modest retirement benefit at age 65, rather than leaving elderly people entirely dependent on family charity or welfare. So also, originally, it was set up where the money was supposed to accrue interest. Now, the one thing that Senator Johnson talked about, which is true as well, is when you put money into Social Security and people say, oh, well, it's my money, they don't like separate everybody's money separately. It all goes into one account, one bucket. And the surplus from it was supposed to be used if the government needed it. But that's not what's happened over the last, I don't know, since 1939. The government just takes the money. It doesn't even have time to accrue any interest. They're not even using the surplus. They're just using all of it. So at this point, it's just a pay-as-you-go system. So like you and I, we pay Social Security, and that literally pays, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Smith retirement. So there's no like interest accrued money that's set aside for people when they retire. And that's why there's such a major problem right now, because we have a lot of people that are getting into retirement age, and we're running into the problem where like the birth rate has decreased. So we don't have as many people paying into it as we have people going on it. And I mean, we could talk about this for hours, but I get very upset when we have these hearings, and there's so many hearings about this, but I just think it's crazy. It's crazy that our parents, for example, paid for like 4, 5, 6 decades into Social Security. And like their money had no chance. And we're paying, what we're paying into Social Security is going to our parents, going to strangers. But here's the thing. If we took that money and we put it in an actual like investment account and it accrued interest, then it would grow to a much, much higher number than, well, obviously it would grow much more because they're not putting it in any fund, basically. And I just don't understand why we keep doing this, why we allow our government to do this. Our government is so bad at managing money. They're so bad at it. And the irony of all of it is then we, the American taxpayers, are then asked to pay more taxes. And then when we go to file our taxes with the IRS, they're like, you know, looking it over with a fine-tooth comb. Like, it's just crazy. And then we have to deal with credit scores and just crazy stuff. And the government just wants to point their finger at us, but they're so bad at managing money. They're so bad at budgeting. They always run out of money. And in the last year, we've learned all the different ways that our tax money is being wasted. And some of it's just stupid human error. And nobody can come up with like a really good solution for all of this. The only solution that I constantly hear in these hearings is we need to make them pay more taxes. More taxes. And that is not the solution, my friends.
Senator Whitehouse.
Well, this hearing is not about Medicaid, but let me just point out that there is, in fact, around $1 trillion in cuts that are coming to Medicaid. And we know that is a fact because fact-based people out in the real world, like hospitals and nursing homes and doctors' practices, are already planning their finances for the crash in revenue that's going to come from the Republican-built red tape bomb that's going to go off in Medicaid to basically drive people off it because they won't be able to keep up with the red tape requirement. So that's where we are on that. I can't let that go unrebutted. With respect to Social Security, well, the trust fund's going to be exhausted a year earlier than predicted. A lot of that's thanks to the billionaires' bill that the Republicans jammed through. It hits in 2032, just 6 years from now. Where are Democrats? We've been pretty out there. We've got bills. You can look at them, kick the tires, take your pot shots. We have legislation that will make Social Security solvent for as far as the actuarial eye can see without cutting benefits. Where's the Republican proposal? Where is it? It doesn't exist. They want to go into a back room and get wheeler deals done that allow for benefit cuts and things like that that they don't want to own, so they don't want to put it out there. That's where we are. The first thing that we should see is if Republicans want to solve Social Security, put your plan on the table. Why hide it? What do you want to do? Put it out there. We've done that. So while we're at it on Social Security, not only is it
But like the solutions that they're coming up with are not good solutions. The solutions that the Dems are coming up with is tax more taxes, pay more. What I would like to see is, okay, let's cut this part. Let's cut this. This money's being wasted. This needs to be refined. Maybe we don't need to send all this foreign aid to this particular country. And then we can take that money and put some of it right now to Social Security, and then maybe we should take some of the other money that we're saving from another program and actually put it in an account that would accrue interest so we don't run into this problem in the future. And maybe we do need to have the discussion about cutting off Social Security, not for people that have paid in for all these years, but maybe there needs to be like an end to it at some point, and instead of this pay as you go type of plan, what if we like gave tax cuts or the government like matched contributions or helped people set up their own funds and had a plan so people could be responsible for their own money? That could work. Just saying. But I just don't think the solution is just to throw more money at the problem, because Americans right now in most income classes, they don't have that extra tax money to spare. They really don't. nor do they want to. We pay way too many taxes in this country, and the problem with the taxes that we pay is that we don't seem to see the benefits. Like, if you disagree with me, I would love to hear in the chat, like, what you think our government is doing well with our tax money. Like, what are some things that you see in your community that has been paid for by our tax money?
Running out of trust fund, but we've also got Social Security Administration internal collapse thanks to Musk and his wretched little doggy boys going in and getting lots of people fired from their jobs. We've got reporting that his little doggy boys took data, planning to take Social Security private data and offer it to private employers. So there are a lot of problems with Social Security, but the big one is, how do we make sure that benefits don't get cut in 2032? And we've got a plan. We're not ashamed of our plan. We put it out there. It's actually not complicated. You actually make people who are making huge amounts of income pay the same Social Security taxes as everybody else, all the way up the rest of their income. And if they're dodging their income because they're really fancy and they've been able to park it through various types of corporate obscuring, go hunt that down and actually make sure that they've got to pay Social Security on that as well. You shouldn't be able to hide your income through a corporate device and dodge Social Security that way. It's still income, you're still spending it.
It's called the tax laws, and you, Senator, have the power to change them. But Donald Trump called this out when he was running for office. They're never going to change the tax laws because it benefits their friends, them, and all of their donors. So anytime that we see tax hikes for wealthy or for corporations, what ends up happening is the consumers end up making up for it. Because these corporations, they don't want less profit. So they just raise their prices. And then the consumer is the one that ends up paying for the tax hikes. Or what we see in some states that have tried this experiment is the wealthier people, they just move out. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to pay 40, 50, 70% of their income, and they just leave. They go to a state with no state income tax. So, I mean, they can try this. They've tried this before, but it just doesn't work, and it always ends up costing the consumer. It just does.
That's still, the way your world works. So we can do that. Remember the day when Biden at the State of the Union said, no benefit cuts to Social Security? And the whole room stood up, standing O, unanimous bipartisan applause. Well, if we're still there, the math is really simple. If you don't cut benefits, you got to add revenue. Where would you want to go for revenue? Why not to the highest income people who aren't paying into it now beyond what an ordinary nurse or plumber would? It doesn't make any sense. Why would you reward people for dodging their income through corporate screens so that they don't have to count it as payroll? They bring it in other ways. This shouldn't be hard. This shouldn't be hard. And the first step, frankly, is going to be our Republican colleagues, put up or shut up. Give us a plan. If you don't have one, let's have a vote on ours. And you can vote it down and own that. But we have been very clear. Multiple Democrat senators have put out plan after plan that will make Social Security solvent. Mine actually makes Social Security and Medicare solvent for 75 years, as far as the actuarial I can see, according to both the Social Security and the CMS actuaries. So we can do this. It's lying there right in front of us. It's just a question of political will and of some people not wanting to own what they want to do to Social Security. That's our problem. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Whitehouse. And before I go to the witnesses, I have to make one clarification. This notion that Republicans haven't got any ideas or haven't put up any plans is just flatly false. And the reality is, before you got here, Senator Whitehouse, Senator Warner and I were talking about a plan that I had put out with him and others before, and we've done this over the years, and there are those sitting here at this dais who have put out plans. So let's not make this partisan. Let's get together and work on solutions. And then we can hopefully get to something that we can put over the finish line and pass.
Mr. Chairman, I'm all for solutions, but I think they actually have to be solutions and not commissions and sort of work projects that don't actually have a solution in them. I think a lot of that stuff is just another way to hide what people want to do in terms of cutting benefits.
Mr. Chairman, the good news is, since we're voting only on a bill today to give a process where Senator Whitehouse's bill could be the solution, I think he will endorse this. We're not voting on a solution today. We're voting on a process by which a bill such as Senator Whitehouse has offered, or a bill like I and Dick Durbin have offered, could be considered. And so that's a good thing, and I think that I look forward to a support for this bill.
Thank you, Senator Cassidy. And we could go on a lot up here. To our witnesses, it's time for you now. You can see there's a lot of emotion and intensity on both sides of the aisle here. And I think that's actually a good thing, because it shows that there's a lot of desire to get this issue addressed. We may still have our fights, but we want to get this fixed. And that's why I'm holding this hearing. And that's what I hope will come out of this hearing is support from you with ideas and analytics and assistance to help us figure out what the plan should be. Let me, before I ask you to begin, give a brief introduction of each of our witnesses. Our first witness will be Mr. Goldwine. He's the Senior Vice President and Senior Policy Director at the Committee for a Responsible Budget. Prior to joining the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, Mr. Goldwine served as the Associate Director of the National Commission on Fiscal Responsibility and Reform, known as the Bowles-Simpson Commission, which I've referenced and served on, and Senior Budget Analyst on the Joint Select Committee on Deficit Reduction, also known as the Super Committee. Dr. Blahaus is the J. Fish and Lillian F. Smith Chair and Senior Research Strategist at the Mercatus Center. Dr. Blahaus specializes in domestic economic policy and retirement security with an emphasis on Social Security, as well as federal fiscal policy, entitlements, and healthcare programs. He's the author of Social Security, The Unfinished Work. Dr. Blahaus also served as a public trustee for Social Security and Medicare from 2010 through 2015. Ms. Lamont is the Executive Vice President and Chief Advocacy and Engagement Officer at AARP, where she has directed several notable advocacy campaigns for AARP, among other achievements. She also oversees AARP's public outreach and education initiatives, as well as state and local advocacy and community engagement across all 50 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Ms. Valles serves as Chief Executive Officer of the National Academy of Social Insurance. Previously, she was a senior fellow at the Century Foundation, where she founded the organization's disability economic justice work and launched a national campaign to modernize supplemental security income. We will begin with Mr. Goldwine's opening statement, followed by Dr. Blahaus, Ms. Lamont, and then Ms. Valles. Mr. Goldwine.
Thank you. Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Wyden, members of the Finance Committee. Thank you so much for inviting me to testify here on this incredibly important issue. Social Security is the bedrock of America's retirement and disability support system, providing vital benefits to 70 million Americans. But Social Security's retirement trust fund is in crisis. In just 6 years, the retirement program is projected to be insolvent. That's not far off. It's when today's youngest retirees turn 68 and when the next class of senators finish up their first term. At that point, the law calls for a 22% benefit cut, the equivalent of $500 per person each month. Congress could, of course, change the law using general funds to cover Social Security's financing gap, but that would entail borrowing an additional $190 trillion over the next 75 years. That's the equivalent of 165% of GDP on top of what we already owe. That additional borrowing would stifle economic and income growth, balloon interest rates, and very likely send the country into a dangerous debt spiral. Paying out of the general fund would also end Social Security as we know it as a self-financed contributory social insurance program. Fortunately, there are a number of well-known solutions to secure Social Security without sparking a financial crisis. Proposals to enact progressive benefit reforms, increase the payroll tax maximum, or gradually adjust the retirement age have been well vetted and should be considered as part of any solvency package. My organization has also been developing novel solutions, including imposing a $100,000 cap on the amount of benefits that a couple can collect, including broadening the employer payroll tax base to cover all compensation, capping the COLA for rich seniors, reforming the taxation of benefits, and I could go on. The challenge before Washington today, though, is less about what to do to save Social Security and more about how. Based on my research and my personal experience, I humbly suggest you task a commission, council, or advisory board to help facilitate agreement on a solvency package before it's too late. This approach would not be new for Social Security. Actually, all major legislation, all of the most significant Social Security laws ever passed were developed with the help of an outside commission or council. The original Social Security Act came from Francis Perkins' Committee on Economic Security. Major legislation in 1939, 1950, 1956, 1972, 1977, they all came out of the work of Social Security Advisory Councils, the predecessor to today's Social Security Advisory Board. And the landmark 1983 reform, which brought us 50 years of solvency, was developed and negotiated in part through the Greenspan Commission. When it comes to Social Security, these special processes are the regular order. Of course, these processes don't remove elected officials from their important roles and responsibilities in the legislative process. Rather, they help facilitate bipartisan agreement by setting forth a specific mission and establishing a safe space to develop and consider options, trade-offs, and compromises. Over the years, Congress has established hundreds of commissions, advisory councils, and other groups focused on all sorts of topics. Many fail, but many succeed, and success takes all different forms. In the case of the BRAC commissions to consolidate military bases, Congress enacted the recommendations in full. For the Greenspan Commission, that served really as a venue for negotiations between President Reagan and Speaker Tip O'Neill. The 9/11 Commission, meanwhile, developed recommendations that Congress and the President implemented piecemeal based on their own policy judgment. I was lucky enough to serve on 2 of these special committees, including working with Chairman Crapo and your colleague, Senator Durbin, on the Simpson-Bowles Fiscal Commission back in 2010. Our commission developed a plan to both stem the growth of the debt and restore permanent solvency to Social Security. 11 out of 18 of our members, spanning the ideological spectrum, supported these recommendations. Even in this body, that would be a filibuster-proof supermajority. Unfortunately, our recommendations were not enacted in full into law, but they did spark a national conversation on fiscal policy and nearly culminated in a grand bargain between President Obama and Speaker Boehner, actually 3 different times. The commission was able to reach agreement because members took the time to agree on a common set of facts, and they worked to build shared trust and understanding. As Chairman Crapo has pointed out before, the relationships built on that commission were a very big part of its success. Of course, all sides had to compromise, but they did so in the spirit of securing our nation's finances and saving Social Security for generations to come. I want to close real quick by quoting the late Senator Tom Coburn, who said this right before he voted for that Simpson-Bowles recommendations, of which he declared he hated half of it. All republics failed, he said. They all fail over fiscal issues. The way we cheat history is for all of us to give up something, he continued, so we create a future that is honoring the tremendous sacrifice that came before us. Thank you again to the members of this committee for your important work.
Thank you very much. Mr. Blahaus.
Thank you, Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Wyden, all the committee members. I'd like to make 4 points in my oral remarks based on my written statement. First, Social Security solvency matters. This is not just an abstract accounting exercise. There's a reason Social Security benefits are so reliable and that Americans do not regard them as welfare. When you get a job, you pay Social Security payroll taxes. These dedicated taxes are credited to special trust funds whose sole purpose is to finance Social Security obligations. These funds cannot spend beyond the revenues they collect. Your benefit is a mathematical function of your earnings that were taxed. All of this enables workers to say to elected officials, we earned these benefits, we paid for these benefits, you can't arbitrarily take them away. But there's a price for that unique security and political strength. It only works as long as lawmakers align benefit schedules with what worker contributions can finance. This has sometimes meant increasing tax collections, moderating benefit growth, and adjusting eligibility ages. If we're no longer willing to do such things, we can't have this type of Social Security system anymore. We could have a Social Security system, but a very different one, with benefit levels disconnected from individual contributions. Workers could no longer assert they paid for their benefits. Social Security's bipartisan advisory councils for decades have repeatedly warned, do not let that happen. Keep the system self-financing and solvent, for if Social Security had to compete for funding each year within the general budget, the unique reliability of its benefits would be lost. Second, speed is essential. Just like a patient facing a potentially lethal condition, the longer treatment is delayed, the weaker the prospects for success. The current situation differs dramatically from the one successfully confronted in 1983. This time, there isn't the luxury of waiting until the trust funds are nearly depleted. Consider this. The 2016 trustees report found that the shortfall then equaled 19% of future benefit claims. Just 10 years later, this year's report found it equals 30% of future benefit claims. And by the time the Old Age Trust Fund faces depletion in 2032, it is clearly too late. At that point, even if new claims were completely cut off, the trust fund would still run out. We are rapidly passing the point of no return, past which it becomes implausible Social Security's historical design can be retained. Third, whether a solution holds depends on the analysis done while developing it. The 1983 reforms were a major achievement, but began unraveling almost immediately. The 1985 report, again, showed a significant shortfall, which then more than quintupled and became bigger than the one just addressed, all within a decade. This happened because the Greenspan Commission relied on estimates of how much each provision would improve things on average over 75 years, rather than how each provision would affect annual operations in different years. This problem was recognized as the reforms were going into effect, but it was too late to go back and fix. Afterwards, Social Security's actuarial methods were improved to prevent a recurrence of this mistake. They now run two important tests: the average balance over 75 years and the annual cash balances through the end of the valuation period. If you go through the ordeal of hammering out a solution, the last thing you want is for the very next year's report to say the problem is back. To prevent that, you just need to make sure your plan passes both tests. Now, while my testimony outlines why the trustees take a 75-year view, a 50-year view can work, provided both of these tests are passed. Fourth, both the process and product need to be bipartisan. Since the shortfall reemerged, there have been 15 different years when one party or the other has controlled both the legislative and executive branches. If either party could do this without the other, it would have been done by now. The 1983 experience is instructive about how key lawmakers can be brought into a bipartisan negotiation. The most influential senators from both sides were on the 83 Commission, House leadership was effectively represented, and the White House participated in the negotiations. The Commission also contained enough outside experts to provide substantive cover. The reasons we need bipartisan compromise aren't just political. They are mathematical. There was once a time when the shortfall was of a size that it could realistically be fixed solely with additional revenues, solely by slowing benefit growth, or solely by adjusting eligibility ages. That time is long past. Maybe there are individual members of Congress willing to increase Americans' payroll tax burdens overnight by the necessary 1/3, or to cut future benefit claims by 30% across the board. But until congressional leadership can deliver the votes to enact one extreme or the other, we should assume a combination of less extreme measures will be necessary. I'll close by commending the committee for holding this hearing and exploring ways forward. The American public will be well served if this leadership results in a significant extension of Social Security solvency. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lamont.
Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I want to begin by applauding this committee for coming together across party lines to talk about Social Security's future. AARP proudly represents Republican.
I just want to point out that recently there have been a lot of hearings that the left just has not shown up for whatsoever. Any of the fraud, or especially election-related fraud hearings, they don't come to. Like, the entire party does not show up. We streamed that Muslim Brotherhood hearing yesterday led by Ted Cruz. Nobody from the left participated in that hearing. But they always love to come in and participate about Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, unless it's about Medicaid or Medicare fraud, and they don't like to come to those. But they always come to these hearings to ask for more taxpayer money and to propose all their ideas of how we as the American taxpayers need to pay more money and we need to give it to them because they have a plan. And this time they're going to fix it. All it takes is more money, right? But I'd love to hear what you guys think. Hit in the chat. Why do you think the left does not show up for the fraud and the Muslim Brotherhood hearings and things like that, but they always show up for the Medicare and Medicaid hearings?
Democrats and independents, all of whom see story after story about partisan division. We know this work is hard, and already in Congress, AARP has endorsed more than 130 bipartisan bills to support family caregivers, to lower prescription drug prices, to crack down on fraud, and to strengthen Social Security's customer service. For nearly 91 years, Social Security has been one of the most enduring promises in American history. Work hard, contribute throughout your career, and retire with a foundation of financial security. Today, that promise supports 71 million Americans, with nearly 185 million workers paying in with every paycheck. Our message today is simple. Protect and strengthen Social Security without cutting the benefits Americans have earned through a lifetime of work, and do this in Congress through regular order in full view of the American people, because Social Security is far too important to be rushed, outsourced, or decided behind closed doors. At AARP, we hear every single day what Social Security means to our members. Members like Lee from Oregon, who worked his entire life, and then came his wife's medical crisis. Lee told us that were it not for Social Security, we would be homeless. And Lee is not alone, and I know you hear from Lee's back home all the time. 43% of older households rely on Social Security for more than half of their income, at a time when 37% of older adults say they feel financially insecure. Women, in particular, rely more on Social Security because they often spend fewer years in the workforce, earn lower lifetime wages, and live longer. Put simply, when Social Security is secure, millions of families are more secure, and so is our economy. Social Security supports $2.6 trillion in economic activity every year. And many forget that benefit reductions enacted in 1983 are still being phased in today. To put those reductions in context for someone retiring today, those changes have already reduced their Social Security by an average of nearly 19%. All the while, future generations are likely to rely on Social Security even more. Private pensions have mostly vanished, and around half of our workforce has no employer-sponsored retirement plan. 42% of Americans age 50 plus who are not yet retired have less than $50,000 in retirement savings. All of this means Social Security will remain essential for many years to come. That is why 81% of older Americans across party lines reject cutting Social Security benefits to save it. So our message is straightforward. Do not cut Social Security that people have earned. And to be clear, there is work to do. The question for us today is not whether to act, it's how Congress acts. The history of special commissions is littered with very good intentions and failed results. They typically lack the clout, the power, and the jurisdiction to do this hard work. Social Security's future belongs at this table before this committee. This committee has jurisdiction, the clout, and a 90-year history of solving hard Social Security problems, and hearings like this one are exactly what will lead us from discussion to action. We are confident that Congress can get the job done through regular order because you've done it before. AARP does not oppose action. We want Congress to act sooner rather than later, and we bring with us the voice of the vast majority of Americans who want this promise kept without cuts. We want to partner with you in lifting these voices up. Many of you have joined us for teletown halls or events. I hope we can continue to do more of those with you and bring this vitally important dialogue to more Americans in your states. We look forward to working with the committee through regular order to get this done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms.
I don't think people realize what a huge problem this actually is. Because, just like she said, so many American people are depending on Social Security for when they retire, or now they're currently getting it. And it's not only retirees that get Social Security. You know, we also have people that are disabled that get, it's called SSDI, Social Security Disability. But I haven't heard one person talk about actually reallocating the money that they take from Social Security and recreating the original fund that it was supposed to be invested into. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that I don't really hear many people talking about. I mean, Senator Johnson briefly addressed that, but we were sold that Social Security was supposed to help people after they worked hard their whole life to have like an income when they retired, so they don't have to, you know, depend on charity, depend on their children, or be a burden to their family. So that was the original purpose. But the way that it was originally created, they only utilized that way for about 6 years, from like 1933 to 1939. But what we've done is we just take the current money that's coming in from payroll tax, and we're giving it to people that are retired. But we're not getting enough money to even cover that. We're not even breaking even. So right now, I think it's like $160 billion this past year that we were short. So they just have to pull that from other funds. And I think that that's something that needs to be addressed. Like, these funds should not be mixed. Like, the purpose of a budget is that, you know, especially with Social Security, because you can see that on your tax return, you can see that on your pay stub. So all that money that they know that they're getting, it needs to go over into the Social Security fund, and that's all it's used for. But we have our government just mixing these funds together, and that's why it's such a mess. And I also think it's kind of funny too that so many of the senators rather have made comments about Elon Musk coming in with his doggy boys. I think, you know, he's referring to Doge. They're so quick to insult Elon Musk, but Elon Musk is literally the first person on this planet to be worth $1 trillion. I feel like he kind of knows what he's doing when it comes to making money, doing a corporate budget. I mean, the United States is like the largest corporation in the world. I think we need more people like Elon Musk to come and look at our books and help these people. Most of our congressmen and senators are attorneys, for the most part. The majority are attorneys. So, you know, I'm sure they were all once great attorneys. They know about the law, they know about the Constitution, they can interpret the laws, they know how that works. That's great. But we don't have a lot of congressmen and senators that were like CFOs or CPAs, or, you know, I mean, a lot of them are professional stockbrokers at this point, but that's another story. But we need people that actually know what they're doing to come in and help us create new laws and create a real solution for our budget, and not just when it comes to Social Security, for like the entire U.S. budget.
Ms. Lamont, I've appreciated working with you in the past and will continue to appreciate working with you on this. Ms. Ballas.
Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Rebecca Vallis, and I have the privilege of serving as the Chief Executive Officer of the National Academy of Social Insurance. This year, as our nation celebrates 250 years of American democracy, we are celebrating this simple but profound idea that lies at its heart: that government exists to serve the people, and that those entrusted with public office are stewards of institutions that belong not to any one political party, but to the American people as a whole. Few institutions better embody that idea than Social Security. 91 years ago this month, when President Franklin Roosevelt signed the Social Security Act into law, he called it a cornerstone in a structure which is by no means complete. I've always loved those words of FDR's because they remind us that Social Security has never been a finished project. It is a living expression of our democracy and of how we show up for one another when it matters most. And I believe that's exactly the responsibility this committee today has, and in the chapter ahead, needs to work on together. I'll offer 3 brief points today. First, Social Security is the cornerstone of economic security in America, as you've heard from everyone who's already spoken. And while Social Security is appropriately celebrated for reducing poverty, the Academy's research finds it is foundational to retirement and disability security all the way across the income spectrum. Virtually all Americans say Social Security will be important or very important to their retirement income. Just 4% of Americans say it will be not at all important to them in retirement. Likewise, just 2% say it would not be at all important if they experience work-limiting disability. Second, at a time of great division on so many issues, the American people are remarkably united around what they want for Social Security's future. The Academy's national survey research, which we conducted with AARP and others, finds that more than 3 in 4 Republicans, more than 9 in 10 Democrats, and more than 8 in 10 independents want lawmakers to strengthen Social Security's revenue base to protect its critical benefits. Americans across party lines, income, education, and generations support starting by reforming the payroll tax cap for higher earners and are also interested in looking to other sources of wealth and income that have increasingly escaped Social Security's financing structure as the economy has shifted. Critically, Americans don't see solvency and benefit adequacy as competing goals. 82% prefer a package that both closes the long-term financing gap and, as my testimony notes, makes targeted improvements that better reflect the realities of modern life. My third and final point is this: Social Security belongs to the American people. That means the process this committee adopts to address Social Security's finances is just as important as the policy choices themselves. Commissions and expedited legislative procedures are not inherently good or bad, but any process to shape the future of a program as important as Social Security should strengthen, not weaken, the connection between Congress and the will of the people it serves. A process that limits public debate or makes it easier for elected officials to distance themselves from the outcome risks doing the opposite. On many issues, democratic governance is difficult because the American people themselves are deeply divided. But Social Security is different. The American people are remarkably united about what they want for the program's future: strengthen its revenue base to protect benefits and expand protections for groups being left behind. In other words, on this issue, the American people have already answered many of the biggest questions. That means Congress's task is not to find ways around the American people, it's to listen to them. Social Security isn't just a government program, and it isn't simply a math problem to solve. It's part of the fabric of American life, relied upon today and counted on tomorrow by Americans across income levels, party affiliations, and generations. As we celebrate 250 years of American democracy, there are few responsibilities of greater consequence than faithfully stewarding a program that belongs to the American people. And the Academy stands ready to support this committee as it undertakes this important bipartisan work. Thank you for having me as part of this critical conversation.
So just so you guys are aware, because I didn't know all the ins and outs until I started researching this, since there's been so many hearings on it this year, but Social Security, the way that it works is right now 6.2% of your salary, if you're a W-2 employee, goes towards Social Security. But it's capped. It's capped at 100, I believe it's either 184,000 or 186,000. Small percentage. I know that they've talked about moving it up from 6.2 to 6.5%. I don't think anybody would have like a huge issue with that. But I think the problem is, in my opinion, is that in America, we're already paying so much in taxes, because it's not just Social Security. We pay income tax, we pay sales tax, we pay property tax. You know, you look at your cell phone bill and sometimes it seems like half the bill is just taxes. My water bill, for instance, I think my usage in my home was like $75 a month. But when I look at my bill, I have all this other fees and taxes that I'm paying to my county and my city. So the bill is, you know, double that. So we're already paying so much in taxes already. And the issue with this, like I said before, is that we don't really see where that money is going. Like, we don't directly benefit from that. You know, everyone wants to talk about roads and sidewalks. How is your area doing? Mine's okay. I mean, it's not phenomenal. It's not great. Where is that money going to? Why do they need more? And Doge came in, Elon Musk came in, and they started uncovering fraud and erroneous payments, irregular payments. They found out that people that have been dead 300 years were getting these payments. And the Dems were very upset that Elon Musk came in and uncovered that, and he ended up, you know, letting a lot of people go in the government because of that. I don't think people would be opposed to higher taxes or a higher Social Security tax if there wasn't so much waste and fraud going on. And really, I think the waste is almost a bigger deal than the fraud, because the fraud, it's obvious. Like, I'm talking about like what Nick Shirley uncovered, like it's obvious that should have been nipped in the butt right away, but that's another story. But it's the waste, the irregular payments, the erroneous payments. That's what concerns me, because there's a lot of it. It's not a small number. It's like billions of dollars in just wasteful spending. And I think that that's where we really need to direct our attention, because I think it's very overlooked. But like, let's say I was doing a budget for my household. I would, you know, go through all of my statements, all of my bills. What I would do, because I've done this before, I'd go through, first of all my bills, all of my needs, you know, mortgage, water bill, etc. And I then would make sure I know all the other little things that I'm spending. And sometimes it gets away from you. Like, sometimes you don't realize that on the Amazon Prime app that, you know, you subscribe to MGM and to Peacock and a couple other streaming channels that you don't even use. So that's where I would start cutting first. Just the stuff that's not being utilized. Nobody is doing that right now in our government. And in my opinion, that's the first place that they should start. What is wasteful? What is erroneous? Let's get rid of that first. I think that would make a huge difference. And I really don't think that people would have a problem paying additional Social Security tax if we actually knew that that money was getting put where they told us it was going to be put. If we actually utilized the system that Social Security was originally planned to do. We had a fund that was going to accrue interest for a certain period of time, and then we wouldn't be having these problems that we're having now. But they've had decades to deal with this, and it always just gets kind of pushed under the rug, but it cannot continue to go on like this.
Thank you, Ms. Vallis, for your testimony and to our entire committee. I'm going to start out with Mr. Goldwine, and I may or may not get past him, but I want you all to listen to this question if we don't get to you during my brief 5 minutes, because I'd like you to respond to it in writing afterwards if I don't get to you. And it gets to the core issues that's been discussed between my colleagues today and, frankly, was discussed by each of you. It's been mentioned by me and Mr. Goldwine that I was a part of the Bowles-Simpson Commission. Senator Warner also referenced that I was a part of the Gang of Six. The Bowles-Simpson Commission was a commission appointed by President Obama. The Gang of Six was a group of 6 senators who just got together and said, we're going to try to help the Bowles-Simpson Commission get over the line. But there's been some very difficult issues raised here today, and that is, what is the value of a commission? Is a commission the direction to go? There are those on our panel who have said, no, this is Congress's responsibility, and I find myself now the chairman of that committee that deals with it. And so I'm a former member of a commission, but I'm now the chairman of a committee that deals with it and that has the jurisdiction to deal with it. And I would say to you all, when we were trying to get the Bowles-Simpson Commission passed, a lot of my colleagues on the floor, after we had our vote and after we put forward, I thought, a fabulous work product, a lot of my colleagues on the floor said, well, that's really great, but I wasn't a part of it. And it was not done through the process that we do to make law here in the United States. And one of the big issues that we ran into was getting buy-in because of those who thought they did not have a part in the process and who thought that they were elected to be a part of that process. And so there's some competing pressures here. And like I say, I see it from both sides. The question I have is, I understand the notion that this committee and the appropriate committee in the House and the Congress and the President are the ones who should make these decisions. And this committee really is the place where these decisions should be crafted. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, in the past, partisan politics have stopped us. And so the idea of let's get a commission to do the job has come up. And it seems to me that there's some merit to that notion. If we won't.
No, we don't need any more commissions, any more committees. These people should not be making the decisions. Like, they're so bad at a budget. It's so bad. Our congressmen and our senators are really, really good at talking. They're good at shaking hands. They're good at collecting lobbyist money. They're good at speaking and going to rallies, and they're great at getting reelected, and they're even better at trading. If they wanna give us some tips and invest our money in the S&P 500, maybe there's a place for them. But otherwise, they can help navigate the wording of the law, navigate the contracts, because like I said, most of them are attorneys, but they should not be creating the budget. They should not be doing that whatsoever. They are really bad at budgeting. And the worst part is we give them a budget, or they agree on a budget, and then they go over the budget, and then our government shuts down. And then law enforcement, our veterans, they don't get paid. They go without a salary, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months. It's shameful. But I think our congressmen and our senators still get paid. I think that's still a thing, right? They're supposedly gonna sign off on a bill that they don't get paid if we have a government shutdown. But right now, they still get paid if there's a government shutdown. They should not be making our budget. They can't even follow the budget that they agree upon. They need to hire experts. Or, maybe some people that are experts like Elon Musk could volunteer to help. But that didn't go really well for Elon. He's been completely demonized since trying to help. The person the one person in the world that's an actual trillionaire who knows about finance, knows about running a big corporation. The left has so many negative things to say about him, but it's really comical if you think about it. I mean, you can hate Elon, you can hate his politics, but you can't deny that he knows how to create companies. He knows how to make money. He's really good at that. I think we can all agree on that. So if they can't even give him respect in that capacity, why would anybody else want to help?
Do our work, then let's get some advisors out there to put public pressure on us with ideas. And so I guess my question to you, Mr. Goldwine, is how do we address this competition of concerns? Is a commission simply a bad idea, or is the way a commission operates, does it need to be handled in a way that fully recognizes and involves the Congress in the outcome of its proceedings?
Thank you for your question, Chairman Crapo. I first want to correct something real fast. We call it the Simpson-Bowles Commission to avoid people saying it's the BS Commission.
Oh.
That was always very, very important to Al Simpson.
I'll try to say that, but it's really hard for me to change.
Of course, this is Congress's job. This is this committee's job, right? What these commissions, committees, advisory boards, special processes do is they help Congress to do their job. It's what they've always done through every major piece of Social Security legislation. These commissions create sort of a single mission, right? The committee is dealing with all sorts of things, but the commission say this is our mission. Our mission is to solve Social Security solvency. Our mission is to get the deficit to a certain percent of GDP. Whatever the mission is, they create a mission, they create a space within to accomplish that mission, they create an opportunity for trust building. And ultimately, I think they engage the public. The Simpson-Bowles Commission did more to engage the public on fiscal policy than all of the committee hearings done by the Finance Committee over the previous 10 years combined. So I think these commissions are really important, not as a replacement of the committee's work, but to help to support it.
All right, thank you. And I can say I've only got 35 seconds left, so I'm not going to ask each of the rest of you to respond in this meeting, but I would ask you to respond to me on this. You will get some questions for the record from other senators, and please take this as one of mine, or as mine for you, as to how do we address this issue? Because in the end, the reason Simpson-Bowles didn't get over the finish line was this issue, was the question of whether it was done in a way that got the buy-in from the rest of the elected officials in Congress. Senator Wyden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have questions for this panel across the board as well. Let me just start with you, Ms. Lamond, if I might. It seems to me what you're saying of safeguarding Social Security for the next generation isn't just dollars and cents. It's about ensuring that Americans can live independently and with dignity. Is that what your members are saying?
Absolutely. And I mentioned Lee from Oregon, and I referenced that I'm sure all of you, when you meet with constituents back home, hear similar stories. Lee was somebody who had good savings. His wife then ended up with a very serious illness and really was in a situation where they were living on their Social Security benefit. And remember, the average benefit is around $2,000 a month, maybe a maximum of $4,000. We hear this all the time, and we're hearing it increasingly, particularly as we enjoy the miracle of longevity, but at the same time, as people live longer, they live with chronic diseases, and we're finding that caregiving is taking more and more time and attention, and that was the experience Lee had. We know, as we talk to our members, that they are struggling right now and are really looking to all of us to come to a solution, to find a way to preserve Social Security so they can count on it. It is, as you've all mentioned, the bedrock of retirement security in the United States.
Thank you. Let me turn to you, Mr. Goldwine, if I might, and talk about the way the underlying economics of Social Security works and how it figures into what we're talking about today. Now, today, working Americans pay into Social Security straight out of each paycheck. But if you are wealthy and you have accountants and lawyers and the like, you can use a bunch of tricks and loopholes to get out of paying anything significant. For example, as if the already low cap on Social Security isn't enough of a giveaway to the very wealthy. The wealthy can structure their income through complex partnerships to avoid paying even the bare minimum into Social Security. So it seems to me, as we get into this issue, fairness is just absolutely essential in order to move forward in a constructive and a bipartisan way. So my question to you is, do you think that raising new revenue and ensuring that sophisticated taxpayers can't dodge their Social Security taxes should be an important component of achieving solvency?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Senator Wyden. As you mentioned, many high-income business owners reclassify their labor income as business income to basically avoid the payroll tax. That's a big deal for Medicare right now, and if you raise the tax max, it would also be a big deal for Social Security. It's definitely something we ought to address.
So, apropos of, again, my question, do you think raising new revenue and ensuring sophisticated taxpayers can't dodge Social Security ought to be a key component of achieving solvency?
I think it ought to be part of achieving solvency, yes.
Great. So now we have something very significant on the table, because I think members of this committee know that I have introduced legislation, not a commission, but a legislation to try to move in the direction of working with Democrats and Republicans around something Mr. Goldwine has said that he thinks makes sense, and that is my billionaire income tax, which is a piece of legislation, black letter text, with 22 members of the United States Senate on as a compromise. And my sense is that what we're going to have to do is work together on legislation, not commissions, in order to deal with this issue and to ensure that seniors that Ms. Lamond has talked about, Ms. Vallis has been eloquent on this subject as well. We're going to have to find a way to deal with the revenue question, and I've introduced legislation that starts us in the right direction. Mr. Goldwine has said, and he comes from, I think, maybe some different perspectives, that that's going to be important, and I think that we ought to get going in terms of talking about legislation where we do what the Finance Committee has historically been all about, and the sooner we do it, the better. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. Next will be Senator Cassidy.
So like I said, I didn't know a ton about Social Security until I started looking into it the last couple months from doing these streams. And what I don't understand is, okay, so like I said, we have this set amount of money that comes from payroll tax that's supposed to be set aside for Social Security, but we already know that it's not enough to pay the beneficiaries of Social Security. So again, if we know we have to take money from somewhere else and we're getting tax revenue from all different sources, why couldn't we look at our budget, look at where some wasteful spending is, maybe foreign aid, for example, because our seniors are so important, and they are, and we need to pay them because they're dependent on it. But why can't we take that money and shift that over to Social Security? Because we already know, they talk about billionaires, but let's be real, guys, there's not that many billionaires in the world. You're talking about a few thousand. It's not a lot. There's 8 billion people in this world. So it's not a long-term solution to try to change the tax law or try to get them to pay more. It's just not going to work. And let's be real also, they don't have to live here. They have a lot of money. They can go become citizens of Liechtenstein. They can move to an island. They can buy an island. They don't have to necessarily be American citizens. And they won't be if, we try to take all of their money and that's our solution for Social Security. It's just not going to work. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't see it working. But why couldn't we just rearrange our budget and allocate something that really is unnecessary to put specifically into Social Security? Why couldn't we do that?
Thank you. Thank you all. Ms. Lamont, do your 38 million members, would they like to have a Social Security system that was fully funded and without the threat of a 22 to 28% benefit cut?
No, they do not want a benefit cut. And
So what I'm saying is, would they like to avoid that? And would they like to have a Social Security program fully funded?
yes.
Is AARP developing a plan to do so?
AARP hasn't endorsed any of the
No, are you
proposals
developing a plan to do so?
that we're reviewing the various
Is
proposals.
AARP developing a plan to address it?
We are not developing our own plan at
Now,
this
that
time.
said, let me ask you. The objection you seem to have to this, what we're considering today, which is merely setting up a process so that Senator Wyden's plan, Senator Whitehouse's plan, Senator Cassidy's plan with Senator Durbin would be considered. It doesn't say that one of those is going to be the final solution. It just says that we're going to consider them. We're setting up a process. Now, you object to this. Now, it seems you object because we're bringing in the Social Security actuary boards. If the Social Security Actuary Board was not involved, but it was just a working group of representatives and senators, bipartisan, having open meetings in which the product or products would be brought back to this committee and Ways and Means to be rejected, accepted, or to be completely replaced with Senator Wyden's plan, for example, or Senator Whitehouse's plan, would you object to that process?
We would support any effort of groups of senators, bipartisan senators, coming together to come up with a plan. We've had examples of that.
So if what we do is take out the Social Security Actuary Board and set up, again, just to repeat this, because this is doable, a bipartisan, bicameral group of senators and representatives starting now to consider all the plans and maybe bring Senator Whitehouse's plan up and maybe bring in Cassidy and Durbin for this committee to consider, AARP would support that.
We would certainly want to talk with you about that.
No, because the rope-a-dope is we want to talk to you about it. I am trying to meet you where you are. If you don't like the Social Security Actuary Board, and we want to tell Lee that she's not going to have a 22 to 28% benefit cut. You spoke movingly of Lee. Right now, she's going to get a 22 to 28% benefit cut if we do nothing. If your objection is the involvement of the Social Security Actuary Board, but instead we have a working group of public meetings bringing something to this table, which may be Senator Whitehouse's plan, which could be accepted or rejected, would you accept that process, Bill?
We are seeking regular order, and what you've described sounds to me like regular order.
That would be regular order. Bringing it back to the committee would be a regular order, and then it would be considered by this committee, and then on the Senate floor. That's what we're talking about. So you could accept that.
If it's regular order, which is what it sounds like, yes. We object to a commission and would very much like the Senate Finance Committee, Ways and Means Committee, bipartisan, bicameral, to come together and both review the many proposals that exist, many of which are bipartisan, some of which are not, and as the chairman said at the beginning, look at the various ideas that are out there.
So I think we may have common ground here after all, because really the point is, how do we review those proposals in a timely fashion? Because they're all out there and they've all been scored in a timely fashion to bring them up here. Again, Senator Whitehouse wants a hearing, and I want him to have a hearing. And what we're discussing today is a process. And I would, at some point, perhaps move that we modify that which is before us. And I am quite willing to take out the Social Security Actuary Board because people keep on objecting to commissions. I don't think it's a commission, but just grant it, and come together as bipartisan, bicameral to review these solutions. And by the way, if the proposal they come up with is a stinky proposal, I'm a gastroenterologist, it comes to mind, we can do Whitehouses, or we can do Wyden's. It can be an amendment in the nature of a substitute, and they will get their day. And by the way, there doesn't have to be benefit cuts. No one is saying benefit cuts. We're talking about a process by which to come up with a solution. There may be common ground here. Thank you, AARP. I yield.
Next is Senator Whitehouse.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Mr. Goldwyn, does my Medicare and Social Security Fair Share Act do the job of making Social Security actually solvent for as long as the actuaries can see?
Yeah, the Social Security Medicare actuaries score your plan as solvent. Against the new baseline, it might fall a few percent short, but pretty darn close at least.
Against the existing baseline?
Against the last baseline, it fully does it. Against the new one, you're very, very close, I think.
Good. Okay. Good to know that it actually will work. Ms. Lemond, does ARP believe that benefits need to be cut in order to protect Social Security solvency?
No.
Say again?
ARP does not believe benefits should be cut.
And Ms. Vallis, you've, I believe, taken a look at my bill. How would you comment on the fairness of the tax proposals that raise the revenue that allow Social Security the solvency that Mr. Goldwyn mentioned without the benefit cuts that Ms. Lemond opposed?
Yeah, I think it's important, in addition to understanding where the American people are on these issues, to also understand the economy that we have today is not the economy we had in 1983, and it's also certainly not the economy we had in 1935. More of high earners' income, and wealth for that matter, now comes from sources that are outside of Social Security's traditional financing structure, as you mentioned in your opening statement. Investment income, pass-through income, all of these are things that are escaping Social Security, if you will. And so along with reforms to the payroll tax cap, which have also been mentioned today, there's a strong economic case in addition to it being part of what the American people are interested in this body exploring for starting to look at other types of revenue options and broadening that revenue base. And I think it's important for this committee to start having that conversation.
So you would approve of it as a revenue proposal?
The Academy does not take positions on individual pieces of legislation, but I would say the American people are very interested in you starting to explore that idea.
All right. Thank you all very much. Mr. Chairman, back to you.
Thank you, Senator Hassan. Senator Johnson.
Hey, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Blauhaus, have you ever seen Table 1?
I have. I actually look at those money's worth memoranda all the time. The one that I usually use is Table 3.
Okay, well, we're talking about Table 1.
Yeah, Table 1, my issue with Table 1 is that it assumes that we just pay full scheduled benefits without collecting the payroll taxes to do it. So it exaggerates the actual rates of return from Social Security. The one that is figured on the basis of what Social Security would actually pay is Table 3. The basic qualitative story is the same. The number is
it's the same type. Again, what I pointed out, there's like 220 different,
right,
income levels when you're born, and the people get hosed most. They get 59 cents on the dollar, and people who benefit most get $4.78 on the dollar. Now, again, in your testimony, you're talking about the grand design of Social Security was, again, forced savings. We're very paternal. You're going to force you to save for your retirement. And then we're going to invest that money, and we're going to get returns on it, and then we're going to return to you, your savings in retirement, correct? I mean, it wasn't a welfare program. It was literally forced savings, returned to you. We'll hold it in, our care, custody, control, correct?
Correct. And I think there's a really, you can continue, but I think there's a really important story to tell, qualitative point to make based on that table and your previous remarks, which is that the earliest recipients of Social Security didn't pay for their benefits. All right, they were basically given benefits they didn't pay for. We paid for them by taxing the subsequent.
Okay, I want to try and get. All right, go ahead. I'm trying to define the problem here, okay? Because we just misdefine it all the time. Again, the problem is $40 trillion in debt. Okay, I mean, if you again, I don't know where you get your $190 trillion, but okay, if you don't take it out of the general fund, you're going to have to increase people's taxes $190 trillion. In these scorings, these actuaries, do they consider the dynamic impact of that? The dynamic economic impact? I'll talk, Mr.
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so $190 trillion is what we'd have to borrow in today's dollars if we wanted to close the entire gap.
Okay, well, which means you'd have to tax people $190 trillion.
Or we could adjust benefits by $190 trillion.
The point is, do they consider the dynamic impact of that I'll also say the fairness. Already, if you have high income earners only getting 59 cents on the dollar, you lift the cap on earnings to raise $190 trillion. First of all, that's the golden goose. It's those people that take that money, they don't put it in a mattress, they invest it in businesses and grow the economy, which I would argue is the number one component of a solution for all these problems, particularly Social Security. We have to grow our economy. So let's not do anything that harms economic growth. Massive tax increases, taking off the cap, first of all, violates the premise of Social Security, right? Because now all of a sudden, for $1, those individuals pay into the Social Security system, or they're going to get even a penny. So again, so you're turning it, by doing that, you're turning it into a welfare system, by and large. Correct.
I would urge extreme caution before severing that connection between contributions.
Yeah, well, they're not using extreme caution. That is the solution is lift the caps, completely violate the original premise of the Social Security system and turn it into a welfare system. That's what they're talking about, doing great economic harm.
And I would say change the political dynamics around the program, because once you have a system where you have some people paying into the system without getting benefits and other people getting benefits they didn't pay for, so you're going to change the political dynamics.
I don't want to cut benefits. I want to honor those promises. Here's a simple solution. Why don't we just get rid of that law that forces us to cut benefits and then recognize the reality of what the true problem is we're running $2 trillion plus deficits. We're $40 trillion in debt. We're going to be $62 trillion in 10 years. Start addressing that problem, because that is the problem that has to be. We can find it just Social Security. We're going to come up with all these half-baked ideas that the actuaries say, oh, this solves the problem. It doesn't solve the problem. Until you address the fact that we're $40 trillion in debt, and that is going to go off in our faces, and interest rates are going to skyrocket. And also, you also have to recognize, too, the gross mismanagement. Do you know, have you ever done a calculation if we would have taken those surpluses and actually invested that in something that has value to the federal government, like stocks? Have you ever done a calculation of how much money we'd have in the trust fund right now that has value to the federal government?
Well, certainly there have been calculations done.
So you're a PhD, you know, so I want to redo that calculation. Last time I did it, $8 trillion. Do you agree with me that a government bond in the hands of a government organization has no value to the federal government?
It's internally held debt. The government is paying.
It has no value. It's worthless, because when the trustees return that bond to the Treasury to pay out those benefits, the Treasury has to float a new bond. So again, I know I've run out of time, but please, if we're going to go through this process, let's recognize the reality of the situation. Let's recognize how grossly this mismanaged, how the American people were literally sold a bill of goods, and now we're going to fix it. And the fixing it is not going to be taxing the crap out of high earners who create all the jobs and prosperity in this country. Thank you.
Senator Johnson literally saying everything that I'm thinking. I mean, spot on. Spot on. Again, this is our biggest issue, that we spend too much in this country. We spend too much. Wouldn't you guys think, like, okay, let's say the government was on Dave Ramsey or Caleb Hammer, okay, and they did like a financial audit. What do you think the first thing that one of those guys would say to the government? Let's say it was Uncle Sam representing us. They would be like, hey, Uncle Sam, stop spending so much. Look at, oh my God, you're spending XYZ on Ukraine and XYZ on Iran and this and that. Like, you got to stop spending that. You're overspending. Get rid of overspending. And like, that just does not come up enough in these hearings. It really doesn't. And in my opinion, that's the first thing that needs to go. We have to figure out a way to live within our means. That's what they would tell us, you know, common folk. We got to live within our means. We can't overspend. We can't charge up our credit cards. But they can. They can, and there's no penalties for our elected officials and government employees overspending. Nothing happens to them when they overspend. What happens to them? They don't get a pay cut, right? No pay cuts for them. Like I said, when the government has to shut down because we're over budget and we have no more money to pay our military And, you know, people that depend on that money, that are putting their lives on the line for our country, they still get their salaries. So they don't care. And that, my friends, is a major issue.
Thank you, Senator Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to you and Ranking Member Wyden for having today's hearing. To all our witnesses, thank you so much for being here today. Mr. Goldwine, I want to start with a question to you. About 1 in 4 Granite Staters, or more than 350,000 people, count on their Social Security benefits to make ends meet. We have to protect and strengthen Social Security for current beneficiaries and for future generations, and I want to be clear that I don't support cuts to Social Security. Now, one way to strengthen Social Security, and I have a different view on this, obviously, than Senator Johnson does, is to make sure that the wealthiest Americans contribute the same share of their income.
I just want you guys to be aware that there was a new, I don't know where the statistics came from, but I saw a video today. I shared it with Mr. Dave. And it went through, in America, like how much income you need to make to be considered, you know, poor, middle class, upper class, whatever. But I just want you guys to be aware that people making over $167,000 of income per year is considered the upper class. Our senators and our Congress make about, I don't know, I think around like 175, between 174 and 190,000, depending if they're like a head of the committee or something, okay? So they're all in the upper class, and they get great benefits and pensions and whatnot. So, yeah, they should pay their fair share. Don't you think that they need to be paying more into Social Security? They should pay more, right?
Social Security as working Americans do. Under current law, Social Security payroll tax only applies to earnings up to around $185,000. So how would raising or eliminating the tax cap strengthen the solvency of Social Security?
Thank you for your question, Senator Hassan. Obviously, the answer depends on how much you raise it and whether you pay benefits. But if you were to eliminate the cap, you could close something in the neighborhood of half of the 75-year shortfall and maybe a quarter to 40% of the long-term shortfall.
And at a time when our deficit has been driven up by extraordinary tax cuts to the wealthiest people in this country, this is one way to address the solvency issue without harming the benefits for recipients.
It is one way to help get to solvency, yes.
Thank you. Ms. Lamond, scammers are becoming more and more sophisticated in using technology to steal people's hard-earned retirement savings. According to the FBI, in 2025, scammers stole about $7.7 billion from seniors, a 30% increase from just 2024. Just in 1 year. So I've appreciated AARP's strong support for improving Social Security's Service to Victims of Identity Theft Act, which is a mouthful, but what we're really trying to do is make sure that when a Social Security recipient's identity has been stolen, that they have a single office to go to, and that the Social Security Administration has dedicated somebody to this work. So this is a bipartisan bill that I co-lead with Senator Grassley to get victims time-sensitive, dedicated help in really difficult situations. In addition to getting the bill across the finish line, what steps should Congress take to support Social Security beneficiaries who become victims of identity theft?
Well, first of all, thanks to you and Senator Grassley for your leadership on this very important issue. Unfortunately, my portfolio on fraud and scams is the fastest growing I have. They are simply unending. And we want to be sure that Social Security Administration is able to provide the kind of support you've described. As you probably know, we have a Fraud Watch Network line where people call in. We have hundreds of calls every week from people who have been victims of scams. And we want to provide the kind of support we're giving, but also have agencies, federal agencies, the IRS we've talked to, Social Security Administration provide similar kinds of support. I mentioned in the beginning, we've supported a number of bipartisan bills in the Congress this year to deal with this tremendous problem of scams and fraud, and we appreciate all of the leadership.
Well, I look forward to continuing to work with the ARP on some of those efforts and seeing what we need to do here to really support them. Last question is to you, Ms. Vallis. We can't talk about retirement security in a vacuum, as you've just pointed out. Seniors are having a harder time today affording everyday expenses than when President Trump took office. Between soaring inflation and the president's failed economic agenda, seniors' Social Security benefits aren't going as far as they used to. So how are increased costs impacting retirement security?
It's such an important question, and Senator, thank you for connecting those dots, because we are having a national conversation about affordability, and Social Security is absolutely and needs to be part of that. For most Americans, retirement security isn't some abstract concept.
Right.
It's about whether they can afford the basics, their housing, their groceries, their prescription drugs, their health care, their long-term care. These are the things we hear when people say what Social Security makes it possible to be able to afford, but also how Social Security doesn't go as far as it might need to. And that's not just why Social Security is so important, but it's also part of why it was so unsurprising in the Academy's survey research. We found huge popularity for actually having a more accurate cost of living adjustment and huge unpopularity for a slower cost of living adjustment that would make that affordability crisis harder for seniors.
Well, thank you very much for your expertise and your testimony. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Warren. You're up.
All right. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Social Security is a promise. You pay in year after year, and then when you need it at the end, it will always, always, always be there for you. But we've got 6 years now ahead of us before the Social Security Trust Fund faces insolvency, meaning that retirees could see their benefits slashed by 22%. Congress needs to act to make sure that doesn't happen. And this is why Democrats are fighting to protect and expand Social Security benefits funded by the wealthiest Americans paying their fair share. But so far, congressional Republicans like to pretend that the only solution is benefit cuts. And when they see how unpopular that is, they then try to pivot and say, let's set up a commission to make the cuts, because then maybe the voters won't blame the Republicans for it. Now, Ms. Lamont, your organization, AARP, represents millions of seniors. Right now, they're seeing skyrocketing prices for everything from health care to gas to groceries. Ms. Lamont, if Social Security checks already aren't keeping up with inflation, what happens if they're cut by 22%?
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. And of course, it would be devastating to our constituency. And that 22% cut, if you get the minimum benefit, is already $400. So think about that in terms of people and their daily expenses. We're hearing more and more from our members, not only about the kind of cost of living, kitchen table economics right now, but also long-term as they think about Social Security.
Yeah. So look, here's a better idea. How about we make the wealthy pay into Social Security at the same rate that working families pay into Social Security? Right now, the Social Security payroll tax is capped at $184,500 in income. That means if you're a nurse or you're a construction worker, you're paying Social Security on 100% of your income. But if you're a corporate lawyer raking in millions, you're only paying Social Security on a tiny little fraction of your income. That is not right. That is why Senator Moreno and I have called for Congress to scrap the cap on payroll taxes. That one reform alone would impact about 6% of all households, the highest earning Americans, and would protect Social Security benefits for at least 2 decades. So, Ms. Lamont, do you agree that securing benefits by scrapping the cap on payroll taxes would help seniors?
Well, You've described what we hear a great deal from our seniors, and in our position, which is please don't cut benefits, we know we have to look for sources of revenue, and we hear all the time from people about is it fair that I'm paying on all of my wages and somebody down the street isn't. Sometimes they use examples of people that work in nonprofits even.
There you go. There you go. So that's not all we could do. You know, while working class families pay into Social Security on every paycheck, wealthy investors take advantage of loopholes to avoid paying into the trust fund. For example, if you're an investor in a hedge fund, you can pay yourself millions of dollars in profits each year without paying anything into Social Security. Now, Ms. Vallis, you're an expert in Social Security and disability policy. Do you agree that securing benefits by closing these loopholes that are available pretty much only for wealthy investors would help seniors and Americans with disabilities who rely on Social Security?
If those forms of revenue do end up being looked at as solvency options, we will see huge protection for people whose benefits wouldn't be cut, including seniors and people with disabilities. And just to note, depending on how you structure it, you could also end up seeing sufficient revenues to strengthen benefits for some of those folks who aren't well served, something you and others have proposed doing as well.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate it. Look, I just think Congress has a choice to make. Either we can decide to protect the top 6% of all earners in America and let the Social Security Trust Fund get into trouble, cut benefits for seniors, throw more seniors into poverty, or we can decide that everybody pays the same share and protects Social Security forever into the future. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warren. We're going to get all these members in before the break. Next, in terms of appearance on the chairman's card, is Senator Grassley.
I mean, I do find it really interesting, and maybe it's not related whatsoever. I really don't know. But I find it really interesting that the cap for Social Security is, you know, right around $184,000. And that just coincidentally is like right around like the payment that senators make. So I think that that's really interesting because they all have to pay that because, you know, they're getting paid as a W-2 employee of the government, so it's automatically taken out. The government matches, you know, their Social Security contributions and puts it back into Social Security, which I also find kind of weird because we are the government, like our tax money is then going back into that. So that's just weird to me, but that's another topic. But I think it's very convenient that it's capped right around the same amount of money that most like elected politicians in the federal government are making. And then we know that, you know, they're paying their fair share, but we also know that they're making money outside of that and their spouses are making money outside of that and they don't have to pay over that $184,000. So I don't know if there's anything related to that. Maybe it just truly is a coincidence, but I just think it's really interesting to think about.
We'll get everybody in. We want to get Senator Sanders and Senator Cortez Masto and Senator Langford, and we can do it all before the break. Senator Grassley.
I apologize. I was across the hall doing the Judiciary Committee nominees. So I'm going to start with Mr. Goldwine. For any Social Security reform proposal to succeed, it will require the support of at least 60 senators. So that means both parties working together to find a solution. Outside of the 1983 commission, are there examples of a commission or other special process that successfully sparked bipartisan cooperation and action?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Committees often spark bipartisan action. As I mentioned in my testimony, every piece of Social Security legislation, every of the largest pieces, have been based on one of these committees, most of them bipartisan. The 9/11 Commission, bipartisan results. The BRAC Commission's bipartisan results. I'll also say Simpson-Bowles although we didn't ultimately get to the finish line, sparked a bipartisan conversation. In fact, 45 senators in this body called for legislation based on Simpson bills, including Senator Wyden, Senator Johnson, and many others that have since left. So absolutely yes.
And Ms. Lamone and Ms. Valls, based on your testimony, I understand you both oppose any sort of commission-based process. Instead, you contend Congress should address Social Security through regular committee and floor processes. I respect that view. I'm open to any process that will facilitate the bipartisan cooperation that's necessary, with emphasis upon the word bipartisan. What are some actions your groups are taking or plan to take to help foster bipartisan cooperation and discussion of Social Security?
Thank you, Senator Grassley, and thank you for your leadership. We know you did a hearing in June, a hearing today. We're hopeful we will see more and more discussion in the Senate Finance Committee. As you know from our testimony, we believe the Senate Finance Committee is where this should be debated, should be considered, and where action should be taken. On our part, we, as you know, have been very active across the country. We do teletown halls with our members, forums. We want to offer that to members of the committee as you deliberate various proposals. We think that's going to be hugely important in terms of bringing people to the table, and not just our constituency, but why don't we reach out to younger people? We know that they have a tremendous stake in the future of Social Security. We want to work with you to bring people together, talk about various approaches, and move ahead. We do not support a commission. We do support action by bipartisan leaders in the Congress, the Senate Finance Committee, House Ways and Means Committee, and you can count on us being an honest partner all the way, both in our outreach to our constituency and also in our deliberations about various policy approaches.
I will echo Ms. Lamond in thanking you as well, Senator, for the question and for your leadership. To answer on behalf of the Academy, the National Academy of Social Insurance does not take official positions on legislative procedures or individual pieces of legislation. So we aren't here opposing or supporting the idea of a commission. But what we are doing to try to resource this committee in this important bipartisan work is asking the American people what they want this committee to do. Because as I mentioned, and as I lay out in my written testimony as well, democratic governance can be difficult on certain issues where the American people don't agree. But on this issue, on Social Security, the American people are very united and very clear about what they want. So our message to this committee would be start by listening to the American people. They've done a lot of the hard work for you.
I see a lot of AARP ads on television. I got a little bit of advice for you, but you're no different than a candidate, Trump, and President Biden. They all ran on a platform, we're not going to do anything about Social Security. And your TV advertisements are saying we aren't going to cut Social Security. I don't blame you for defending the program that way. But we got to wake this entire nation up to the fact that there's going to be a 20%, 22% cuts if we don't do something right now. And you ought to spend some of your money waking up people to the fact that there's a crisis down the line. And you say don't cut Social Security, but it's going to be cut automatically if you don't wake the people of this country up. And that's what I'd advise you to do, because you got a big voice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to be difficult here, but Senator Langford would be next, and then Senator Sanders, and we're going to be done. Okay, Senator Langford.
Why would that be being difficult?
Everybody's juggling.
Y'all, thanks for being here. Thanks for the conversation. I do appreciate this for the chairman and ranking member to be able to have a dialogue about Social Security. This is a moment that we should talk about stabilizing the program. And the concern is that we all know in 6 years, we have an insolvency issue. That red light on the dash has been flashing for a long time. But the challenge is when we have a conversation about Social Security, it immediately becomes an issue of fear-mongering across the country that this is all about taking benefits away. We're actually trying to be able to get to a point that no one loses benefits. In fact, we stabilize the program long-term is the goal of this. But it is a real challenge to be able to have a grown-up conversation about this to try to figure out how do we resolve it. I am one that's supportive of this committee doing its work to be able to resolve something or to be able to pull together a bipartisan, nonpartisan commission made up of members to be able to make recommendations. There are some members that spend a lot of time in digging on the issues of Social Security, and there's some that do not. And to be able to pull the people together that have an investment into time in the details of what it's going to take to be able to do that on both sides of the aisle, I think it's beneficial to do that and allow that group to be able to do the work, bring it back to the rest of the body, and to be able to have a vote. So that's the way often these difficult challenges actually happen. I was part of a small group that met with President Obama years ago when the House changed over, and it was a Republican House, Democratic Senate, and a Democratic president. Now, it's well known around this town that often hard issues are done when there's bipartisan differences in House, Senate, and the White House, and some gap there is when a lot of these issues are taken on. So I was part of that small group that sat down with President Obama and said, we now have a Republican House, a Democrat Senate, and Democrat White House. This would be an ideal time to be able to talk about some of these hard issues like this. His response to me in that private conversation, which I've talked about since then, was, I didn't campaign on this. This is not what I campaigned on. We're not going to work on this. It takes two to tango on this. We've got to have a White House and a Congress that are both willing to do this, but we need outside groups to also contribute to this. Ms. Lamont, thank you for the work that you've done. There are a lot of seniors in my state that are appreciative of this, but if I can raise something to you, we need to have good, honest dialogue that doesn't start with people being afraid that I'm now going to go attack seniors. If I go on the AARP's website today, on the website today, it says, tell Congress, don't cut our Social Security. Social Security didn't cause the nation's debt. We paid for Social Security through every one of our paychecks. However, some are calling for a commission in Congress that could potentially cut Social Security and Medicare and other in order to reduce our country's debt. This is outrageous. We won't let lawmakers take the money we've earned over a lifetime. Contact your member of Congress. Now, what we're trying to do is have a conversation about how we stabilize this program and make it secure. But what your entity is doing is telling people to call my office and say, stop talking about this. We should talk about this. I should listen to Senator Sanders and his ideas on this. I should listen to Senator Wyden and his ideas on this. They should listen to mine. We got to figure this out. But this is a message that says, don't let them talk about this. 6 years from now, we go insolvent. I have a great relationship with the AARP leadership in my state. He does a phenomenal job, keeps me informed, is a terrific advocate for the seniors in my state. That's great. But we need outside entities that say, please tell Congress to sit down and have hard conversations to solve this, not don't talk. And that's my concern on this. And I'd love to be able to have a national ally on this as well to say, let's figure this out. A commission is one way to do it. This committee working through a long process is another way to do it. At the end, Congress still has to vote. The American people are still going to be able to hear this out. But long term, we got to be able to figure it out. Is that an unfair request?
We will meet you with that request. I believe that that communication was really geared toward commission, which we do not support. We support the kind of bipartisan discussions to have in the Finance Committee and elsewhere, and to work individually.
But a commission even would have bipartisan members, including many members from this committee. I mean, it's a way that hard things have been done in the past.
Yeah, we haven't supported commissions over a period of time, believing that, and also the fast track authority that is involved in that, believing that it is, this is such an important issue, it should be dealt with through regular order.
What is funny to me is most commissions that I've been around and most pieces of legislation in the time that I've been in Congress, when the commission is actually at work, I have to call somebody in one of the outside organizations because they see the text before I do. Because there's a lot of in and out conversations about what do you think about ideas. So any commission report, any work like that would not happen in a dark back room that's smoke filled I don't like smoke anyway. It's going to be in a conversation with outside groups, with people to be able to be engaged. My encouragement would be, let's find a way to be able to work together to be able to solve this, not just discourage anyone from actually talking about it.
The gentleman's expired. Senator
Okay, guys, we got to talk about this because, I made the comment in the chat, what does AARP have to do with this? But I need to educate you guys why this lady is here, why AARP wants to be in this hearing about Social Security and what their role is. So when you turn 65 in America, you are now eligible for Medicare. So, and the way you qualify for it is you have to have had worked, I think it's 40 quarters. And Part A is free if you've worked those 40 quarters. And Part B, you pay a small premium. And I want to say it's, this year, it's $205.50, something like that. And it goes up a little bit every year. If your income after 65 is higher, then your Part B premium is higher also. Now, Part A and Part B, so Part A covers hospitalization, any type of inpatient treatment, and Part B, and I'm talking about original Medicare, Part B covers durable medical equipment, outpatient procedures, doctor visits, that type of thing, and then you have Part D, which is prescription drugs. So it only covers, A and B only covers 80%. So you're liable for the other 20%. So let's say, you have Part A and Part B, and you have $1 million hospital stay, which is very possible in today's day and age. So Medicare is going to cover 80%. You would be liable for $200,000 potentially. Or let's say you got cancer. Cancer could be millions of dollars in treatments. You would be responsible for 20% of the bill. So what most seniors do is either they get what's called a Medicare supplement, or they get a Medicare Advantage plan. It's called an MA, or if it comes with a prescription coverage, it's called an MAPD. And I'm not going to go over, all the differences. That's a conversation for probably a private live stream that we'll do in the future. But most seniors, if they are on a fixed income, they're going to elect to do an MAPD. And AARP is a company that is in conjunction with United Healthcare, and they are one of the largest insurance companies for Medicare, Medicare Advantage, and Medicare supplements. So that's one of the reasons that this lady's here. Now, a lot of people choose to get on an MAPD because typically it's zero premium. They just pay their Part B premium. And some of these plans do what's called a give back, where they actually will pay part of the beneficiary's Part B premium. So that's an incentive that they give people. And if you've ever looked at an MAPD plan, they give seniors all these different benefits. A lot of plans have free dental and over-the-counter benefits and chiropractic and acupuncture and a whole bunch of stuff. But this is the important part. So if you are on an MAPD, you no longer have original Medicare as your primary insurance. Let's say you go with an AARP Medicare Advantage plan. Now AARP or United is your insurance company, and it works more like a traditional insurance plan, like an HMO where you have co-pays for everything. But now United AARP, they're the ones that decide whether your claims are going to be paid, what you have to pay out of pocket. They're now responsible for your health care. They're like the gatekeeper. And in exchange for that, the government, Medicare, pays these companies over $13,000 a year for every enrollee that signs up for a Medicare Advantage plan through their company. Now, there's another type of plan called a DSNP, DSNP, and that's a dual plan where somebody gets Medicare and Medicaid together. And if you get Medicare and Medicaid together, you actually are not eligible to get a Medicare supplement. You have to be on one of these D-SNP plans. And now our federal government pays like AARP much more money if there's a dual plan. They get anywhere from $21,000 to $35,000, depending on the circumstances, okay? So just for enrolling that beneficiary, these companies get that guaranteed money from our government, okay? Do you guys understand? That's why they're at this hearing. This is a huge moneymaker for them, okay? They just get that money, and it's from the government, so they know that they're going to get it. They don't have to worry about, you know, the average person like missing a premium payment. They're getting that money guaranteed, and that's a lot of money. I actually was a little bit shocked when I saw that the number now is over $13,000 for the year. I want to say a few years ago, it was like $8,500 that they were getting per beneficiary, but that's really increased. So my point is, these companies have a vested interest to be in these hearings. They are making a tremendous amount of money from our government paying them premiums. And once they get those premiums, they're now in control of our seniors' care for the most part. And some of these companies have a history of denying claims, utilizing AI software that's not the greatest, and that denies claims could be 90% of the time. I don't know. But that is why this person is in this hearing. That is 100% why she's in this hearing. And that's why they are so interested in keeping these programs alive. Oh, the other thing I wanted to tell you guys too is that I believe the statistic, and this was a couple of years ago, so it could be higher, but a few years ago, the statistic was over 56% of our seniors were on both Medicare and Medicaid, or, you know, dual plan. I don't know what that is now, but I would guess that it's probably higher.
Anders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, panelists, for being here. And Senator Langford is right. We should work together, and we should talk to each other. But I think in that discussion, we have to take a broad look at what's happening in our country today, which in fact goes beyond Social Security. And what is the reality of American society today? I don't have to tell anybody on the panel that we have millions of seniors who are struggling. I think we have about half of seniors are trying to make it on $30,000 a year or less. 1 out of 3 are struggling economically, unbelievably. Senator Langford, I mean, it's really quite unbelievable. Something like 20% of seniors in America are trying to make it on $15,000 a year. I mean, that's unbelievable. I don't know anybody survives on that. But within that reality of so many of our seniors struggling, there is another reality that has to be placed on the table. And that is, today we have more income and wealth inequality than we have ever had in the history of the United States of America. You remember the Gilded Age of Rockefeller and J.P. Carnegie? Much worse right now. So if you're going to talk about saving Social Security, you got to throw that into the hopper. And what Senator Warren was saying in legislation that I have, which is called the Social Security Expansion Act, is not complicated. And you want bipartisanship? Republicans support it outside of here. In the real world, Democrats support it, independents support it, not very complicated. Should Elon Musk pay the same percentage of his income, which he doesn't pay anyhow, into the Social Security Trust Fund as a fireman or a nurse? Anybody think that makes sense? Nobody does. And the bottom line here is, at a time when the people on top have never, ever had it so good and seniors are struggling, we've got to do what senior advocates for years have said: lift that cap.
Is these premiums and these subsidies, regardless if people use them or not, if somebody was a healthy adult, maybe they shouldn't be, maybe their insurance company shouldn't have that money. Maybe, you know, they should have that money themselves and be able to go see like an alternative doctor, or bank that money, or use that money on healthy food instead of subsidizing the premiums of health insurance companies that are, you know, make trillions of dollars. I don't know. That's just a thought. That's just a thought. I don't know what you guys think, but I'm gonna say goodnight for the night. It's pretty late here. I am gonna be back here tonight, or tomorrow night rather. I want to finish up this stream, and there was actually some pretty good hearings this week. If you guys have any hearings that you would like me to stream from this past week, you know, put it in the chat or comment on one of the videos. Be sure to check out my bio, because a lot of you guys have asked for memberships that include chats outside of YouTube. So I have a couple of new membership options where we will have a Discord channel. So go check that out. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you so much for being with me tonight. I hope everybody has a great night.